He was the coolest spy in the world. However, Pierce Brosnan had to deal with challenges that no screenplay could have prepared him for offscreen. He never forgot 5 names, fame, anguish, and treachery. The man responsible for 007 for the first time interrupts his silence. He couldn't forgive these 5 performers for their heartless betrayals and lost connections. One assumed his ideal role. Filming became a nightmare due to another. One almost ruined everything. Who are they? And what actually took place? You might be surprised by the answers. This isn't rumors. It's a personal matter. Dalton, Timothy. It was more than simply a career setback for Pierce Brosnan when he first heard rumors that Timothy Dalton had been chosen to play James Bond. It was intimate. Neither man was an enemy. They were indeed friends. It was worse because of that. Brosnan was personally chosen by Bond producer Albert Cubby Broccoli as the franchise's future star back in the mid-1980s. The stars were in alignment. He had the charisma, the presence, and the good looks. Pierce was exactly what her late husband had envisioned for Bond, according to Ian Fleming's widow. However, then, his chances were dashed by an unforeseen event at the height of the excitement. As the star of Remington Steele, Brosnan appeared to be at last able to don the Bond tuxedo after the show's cancellation in 1986. Broccoli had stated unequivocally that the job belonged to Brosnan if he could act. It wasn't merely rumors. On the set of For Your Eyes Only, where his then-wife Cassandra Harris starred, Brosnan had received an invitation to meet the Bond crew. He was tipped to be the next 007 by everyone. However, NBC recognized a chance to boost numbers as soon as the Bond rumors intensified. Remington Steele's cancellation was reversed, and additional episodes were scheduled. Because of his contractual duties, Brosnan had to turn down the Bond offer. It broke my heart. Timothy Dalton took over at that point. Before Brosnan, Dalton had been on the Bond shortlist for years. And he was given the role when it became available again. As his close friend assumed the role that had been offered to him, Brosnan was only able to observe from the sidelines. Dalton had done nothing wrong in a field where opportunism and backstabbing are commonplace. He was just the backup. For Pierce, however, it was like losing a once-in-a-lifetime chance to a person he knew. Brosnan once remarked, "I had to smile through it." That smile was a huge letdown on both a personal and professional level. Roger Moore's charm and wit were not there in Dalton's portrayal of Bond. His Bond was more real, gritty, and intense, a conscious change to reflect the strain of the Cold War era. The Living Daylights, 1987, performed well abroad, but License to Kill, 1989, did poorly in the US. However, this change did not sit well with everyone. Only making $34.7 million. It lacked the spark that Brosnan could have added, according to many critics and fans. In retrospect, some even contended that Dalton served as a stand-in, holding the seat open until Brosnan could come back. However, it seemed like the door had been irrevocably banged shut at that moment. For Brosnan, it has been too difficult and simply agonizing to see a friend become merely a symbol of everything that has been stolen away from him. Dalton, the friend, does just that. Since he possesses the character, he turns into the torture symbol. This meant that Brosnan had to deal with the devastating news that his wife, Cassandra, had ovarian cancer at this time. The professional hurt was in fact exacerbated by that anguish. She was more interested in the Bond dream than he was. She was the first to believe in him. Brosnan's chance at Bond was now gone due to his illness. And he had previously joked and had cocktails with the man who was filling the void. Through the years that fans now refer to as the lost years, Brosnan continued to work. He spied in the Fourth Protocol between 1986 and 1994 and appeared in Diet Coke ads that hinted at Bond's Ellington-esque look without actually mentioning it. He continued to be visible, but the pain never completely went away. Bond became into a phantom that haunted his career throughout those peaceful years. Dalton's Bond flickered and burned. Brosnan's moment never appeared. When Dalton eventually resigned in 1994 and the team was looking for a fresh direction, Brosnan answered the call. The part was finally his. However, the emotional burden had not yet diminished. Brosnan never publicly expressed any resentment at Dalton, even when he was officially introduced as Bond in 1995 with his debut movie Golden Eyes, which helped the franchise grow and earn over $350 million worldwide. However, the history was widely known to those in close proximity. As an unexpected bottleneck, Dalton stood. Yes, a good guy. However, an indentation of pain briefly ripped away from Brosnan's heart. Timothy wasn't hated by Pierce. What Timothy stood for, he detested. A postponed dream with a closed door. As one industry insider concluded their remarks, and broken promise. But those rounded edges haven't worn down over time. In the end, Brosnan's Bond left behind an unforgettable legacy. He made 4 movies, made over $1.64 billion at the box office, and was considered by a generation as the ultimate 007. However, underneath that polished exterior was the shadow of Timothy Dalton, a former buddy who was now a foe. A harsh twist of time and contracts, but not out of malice. Given Dalton's success, it wasn't particularly difficult in a career that was gained by charm, but Brosnan was expected to come first. Wait until you see what Pierce lost next if you thought losing Bond to a friend was difficult. Brosnan, Christopher. Christopher Brosnan was just Pierce Brosnan's adopted son to the outside world. He was more than that to Pierce, though. He was a second opportunity to become a father, something he was never given. When Pierce married actress Cassandra Harris in 1980, Christopher became a part of his life. Charlotte and Christopher were Cassandra's children from a previous marriage. Pierce also formally adopted them following the death of their biological father, actor Dermot Harris, in 1986. Not only did they take his name, but they also seized his affection. He vowed to provide them with everything he had been denied during his own shattered upbringing, becoming the father he never had. Christopher initially appeared to flourish under Pierce's tutelage. He had a strong bond with his sister and younger half-brother, Sean, and was intelligent and vivacious. According to Pierce, it wasn't only about being a parent when Cassandra and the kids entered his life. Being a family was it. They lived together as a close-knit group for a number of years. However, things began to fall apart when tragedy struck in 1991. After a grueling 4-year battle, Cassandra lost her fight with ovarian cancer. The family was devastated by her passing. Christopher lost the one person who had always provided him with emotional support, and Pierce lost the lady who had provided him with stability. When Cassandra passed away, Christopher was just 19 years old, and the loss was more devastating than anyone could have predicted. Christopher silently slid as Pierce buried his sadness in his job and fatherhood. He worked behind the scenes on Pierce's Bond movies, including his Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough, in an effort to remain near the family. However, indications of instability were present. Christopher received a £1,000 punishment for driving under the influence in 1996. He was detained once more a year later and given a 3-month prison sentence for a second crime. Pierce made an effort to assist by paying for legal fees and offering assistance, but a deeper crack had appeared. The drugs followed the arrests. After experimenting with GHB and then heavy drugs, Christopher became involved in London's underground drug culture. The addiction spread rapidly. He went into a coma after collapsing outside a bar in London. He was arrested once more in 2012 when he was 32 years old. For possession of hard substances. The vicious tabloids focused more on his last name than his illness. They saw him as the addicted son of the Bond actor. For Pierce, however, this was a nightmare come true. Like Cassandra, his adopted kid was vanishing before his very eyes. Another life dying behind a burden he was unable to bear. Pierce had given his whole being to his family. It was more than just affection for kids. He required them. He was grounded by his children in a field that frequently drained men of their souls. However, Christopher came to symbolize helplessness, which Pierce detested the most. Even after losing Cassandra, he supported her through every chemotherapy treatment, hospital stay, and restless night. He was all too conscious of that helplessness now as he watched Christopher be torn apart by the same sorrow. "I despise what this world did to Pierce," He confided to a buddy one day while he was by himself. "I regret not being able to stop it." Christopher had committed a nearly 2-decade vanishing act by 2024. The Slayer's shot followed. He was discovered by the paparazzi outside a London food store, looking thin, worn out, and by himself. Despite being only 51, he appeared to be in really bad shape. Those who recalled him as the happy youngster next to Pierce on red carpets were in stark contrast. He is only a shadow of the person he once was. A far cry from family meals and the sets of Hollywood. Pierce once attempted to create a pace of life that was very different from their reality. Pierce never publicly criticized him, but his quiet was a powerful statement. The hurt, the guilt, and the grievance that tore at him. Christopher's funeral was never truly one filled with memories and sorrow. He never experienced death. He simply vanished. Bit by bit, year by year, addiction consumed him until he was essentially a stranger. Cassandra had been buried by Pierce. Then, in 2013, he laid his adopted daughter Charlotte to rest after she passed away from the same cancer that killed her mother. The tragic trio of loss was symbolized by Christopher's death from yet another sickness, this one resulting from pain and grief. His 3 favorite people. 3 lives that were completely engulfed by forces Pierce could not control. Pierce is largely silent about Christopher in the media and on discussion boards. He does, however, occasionally talk about him in a tone that seems almost predetermined, as though he has been prepared for it. According to some sources, he doesn't say anything, while ensuring he is aware of what transpires. In addition to calling certain pals in London to check on the actor, he also sends help via other sources. One acquaintance claimed that even though he eventually learned to let go, he never truly did. He would say that love isn't always enough. The person you are attempting to save may not always want to be saved. And that's pretty much it. More than Dalton. Pierce still despises the studio executives who deceived him more than anything else. Craig Daniel. Pierce Brosnan was unaware that Die Another Day, which he starred in 2002, would be his final role as James Bond. He was more than just a multi-billion-dollar franchise's star. For a generation, he was Bond. The total revenue for the last movie was $431.9 million, making it, at the time, the highest-grossing Bond movie. Physically fit, preparing for the next film, and already coming up with innovative ideas for Bond 21, Brosnan was at the top of his game. Before a single phone call ended everything in 47 seconds, everything was proceeding as planned. A fantastic James Bond, you were. Many thanks. Farewell. The message was that. Delivered without fanfare and frigid. Behind the scenes. Months before contacting Brosnan, Eon Productions had already decided up their minds. They desired a younger Bond, someone who would revitalize the series and steer it along a more gritty path. Brosnan was unaware that the producers had already begun screen testing other actors, including Daniel Craig, while he was still promoting Die Another Day. A harsh truth would later be exposed by internal communications. Ironically, Pond thought Brosnan was too old and too costly. His own triumph had turned into his demise, and the position that had kept MGM afloat and established him as a world-renowned figure was relinquished with startling apathy. Brosnan was inconsolable. The way it was done, in addition to the fact that he was fired, made the betrayal very painful. There was only a phone call following 4 successful Bond movies and over 10 years of devotion, no meeting, no goodbye, no thank you gesture. When he was by himself in the Bahamas. It was absolutely shocking, he stated afterwards. I was totally confused. I believed that we were filming Bond 21. A knife to the back was the abruptness of the dismissal and the quiet in the studio. Additionally, the guy filling his place was Daniel Craig, an actor Pierce had never met but who came to symbolize all that had been taken from him. The announcement of Daniel Craig as the next Bond in Casino Royale sparked an instant uproar. The choice of a blonde, lesser-known actor was questioned by devoted followers. As the franchise he helped revive was constructed without him, Brosnan, who was still recovering from recent injuries, watched. In interviews, he made an effort to remain polite by stating, "I wish him well," but it was clear that he was in anguish. Insiders claim that Brosnan felt taken by surprise not only by the studio, but because Craig himself didn't personally seek out. There was no phone call, no note, and no recognition of the man who had sustained the franchise throughout the 1990s. Nevertheless, Casino Royale turned out to be a huge hit. Critics applauded Craig's portrayal of Bond, which was ruthless and emotionally raw. It lacked the glitz and was gloomy. Roger Moore is less than Jason Bourne. Earned $616.5 million and contributed to the franchise's rebranding for a younger audience. The triumph was bittersweet for Brosnan. On the one hand, made it through. The other did so without his presence. It was like seeing someone else raise your child, he would later say. He lost more than just a part. The future of something he helped restore from the ashes had been erased from him. Identity was the other problem. After Bond was fired, Brosnan's career took a serious hit. He now only costs $3 million instead of $12 million. Since the studios believed he was too closely linked to Bond to be successful elsewhere, they had stated he was worth less. According to an executive's internal remark, he was too Bond. Pierce's entourage had to go smaller, too. In the following, he fired 12 employees. The depression was severe. For the first time, his kids had witnessed him cry. In both a professional and personal sense, the rejection from Bond producers seemed like desertion. The fact that the franchise decided not to contact Brosnan just seemed unprofessional. Before completing his portfolio with a number of high-profile movies like Black Adam, he spent a lot of time attempting to get back on track and taking roles in romantic comedies in independent films. Was the specter present in the space? In a manner that conveyed displeasure, Brosnan watched Craig lay down 5 pictures over a 15-year period. Although he has never publicly attacked Craig, it is evident from his remarks throughout the years that he believed the entire process might have been handled more effectively. On one rare occasion when he talked openly, he observed, "There should have been more grace, more class." Rather than discarding him, they may have rejoiced. Ultimately, Brosnan did not despise Daniel Craig. He detested Craig's values. The studio's closure, the quiet, the abrupt firing following 10 years of dedication. Although Craig was never the antagonist, Brosnan saw him as the metaphorical stand-in. That silent suffering has never subsided for the man who received the future Pierce was promised. Brosnan takes it politely. However, others close to him confirm that Craig will always be a part of the actual scars left by Bond. You'll be shocked by what follows, so hold on to your pity. This has nothing to do with casting or contracts. It became ugly and was personal. Pierce Brosnan, an A-list diva co-star, is renowned for being one of Hollywood's most polite and sensible performers. He has maintained a reputation for professionalism and calm strength in spite of decades of loss, career betrayal, and personal pain. People were therefore surprised to hear his name brought up when there were rumors of conflict on the Mamma Mia set until further information became available. Pierce wasn't the cause of the tension, someone else was. The happy set had become a pressure cooker due to a renowned co-star who was referred to by insiders as an A-list diva. Brosnan detested every second of it. In 2025, Christine Baranski, who starred in both Mamma Mia movies, disclosed that one specific co-star made the entire process of filming a misery. Fans and insiders immediately conjectured even though she did not name names. A lot of people blamed the cast's biggest name. However, Brosnan's close associates underlined that Pierce wasn't the issue. The victim was him. On set, Brosnan, who was well known for his kindness and tolerance, had a heated argument with someone who insisted on frequent rewrites, arrived late, and treated the crew like background props. He nearly left Mamma Mia. Later, a production assistant disclosed, "Here we go again." Mamma Mia had Pierce on board. Following years of playing demanding parts in dramas, thrillers, and Bond films, the movie was meant to be a welcome change. With its Mediterranean setting and upbeat music, it appeared like the ideal place for play and relaxation. Instead, he was forced to contend with someone who dominated the production's tone in a creative battleground. Another crew member claimed that it was a guessing game every day. Would she make someone cry today, or would she be nice? That contradiction contradicted all of Brosnan's values. For Pierce, it was his relationship that made the problem more personal. To the themes of the movie. After losing his wife Cassandra and daughter Charlotte, he cherished love, second chances, and family, all of which were emphasized in Mamma Mia. Acting in the movie meant more to him than just getting paid. It was an expression of feeling. However, his co-star didn't feel the same way. She reportedly made passive-aggressive comments criticizing the script, the clothes, and other actors, treating the movie as beneath her. That kind of contempt was unacceptable to Pierce, who had studied Shakespeare, mime, and classical theater. Several crew members said that despite the pressure of being publicly insulted, Brosnan had tried his best to remain composed. The actress once declared that until her trailer was moved closer to the scene, she would not practice. On another occasion, she insisted on changing the costumes just before the shoot began. Brosnan. Just get the sequence, the director was reportedly told in an attempt to smooth things out. I'll adapt. But the annoyance was mounting. According to one set decorator, he detested the way she treated those around her. He is the type of person who greets the gaffers by shaking hands. She avoided making eye contact with them. Ego had not been the source of Pierce's repulsion. It had come from values. The exact thing Pierce had built his entire career on had been quiet tenacity. As a child who had grown up fatherless and bounced between relatives, Pierce learned the hard way how vital kindness and constancy are. He became a very sympathetic person as a result of his amazing encounters with loss. Thus, it touched a nerve to see someone ruin a whole production with trivial requests and mood swings. He claimed it made him think of all the things he detested about Hollywood. Later, an old friend revealed the harshness and selfishness. The right. To make matters worse, some tabloids tried to sway the story in favor of the actress. Photographs purportedly showing Brosnan in tight or frustrated poses were used as proof, and they were construed as proof that he was the one initiating the trouble. However, sources close to the production kept a counterargument. According to one assistant director, he was safeguarding individuals. He hated the vibe on set. He detested the fact that no one dared to challenge her. He never struck out, though. He just alienated himself. When the movie was ultimately finished, Brosnan left a number of promotional events, not because he was angry but rather because he was tired. Required time to recuperate from what proved to be one of his career's most emotionally taxing shootings. The fact that Brosnan has never publicly identified the actress in the years since says loudly. He was not outwardly angry. It was persistent and silent. He detested the event since it represented an egotistical conflict in a happy environment. The event acted as a reminder that there would always be some who possessed the ability to transform light into darkness throughout his arduous journey to achievement. For viewers, the musical was a source of nostalgia and amusement, but for Pierce Brosnan, it served as a reminder of one of the few actors he genuinely detested working with and one of the few business partnerships he would never rekindle. Pierce was more disappointed with the project's intended outcome than he was with the chaos. After many years of gloom, Mamma Mia was supposed to be the bright spot. It was his opportunity to rediscover happiness and release himself from the weight of relationship, pain, and personal tragedy. Rather, it served as a reminder to him that poison may exist even in the most vibrant environments. When you think it can't be any more brutal, it does. Hollywood demonstrated that it could. The business leader. No one in Pierce Brosnan's life evokes true animosity more than an actor, co-star, or critic. With a single, impersonal phone call, the anonymous boss put an end to his reign as James Bond. Following 4 successful Bond movies and over 10 years as 007, Brosnan was getting ready for a successful 5th appearance. He had been submitting concepts for what would become Bond 21, remaining in top physical condition, and coming up with plots. However, everything fell apart on a calm afternoon in the Bahamas in 2004. 2:47 p.m. was the time the phone rang. The voice on the other end was that of a middleman delivering the verdict. It wasn't even that of a producer. A fantastic James Bond, you were? Many thanks. Farewell. There was no warning, no meeting, no handshake, no farewell meal. The exchange lasted only 47 seconds. For Brosnan, it was a public execution carried out in private, not only a firing. Die Another Day had just made $431.9 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing Bond movie ever. Brosnan had brought Bond to a new generation, revitalized a series that had all but died, and produced 4 pictures that brought in a total of almost $1.4 billion. All of stuff was irrelevant. Months had passed since the decision was made. The studio desired a new direction, a younger Bond, and a fresh start. That was not Brosnan's vision. Furthermore, the individual who let him go lacked the grace to confront him directly. While Pierce was still in the position, executives had already been replacing screen testers for 2 years, according to internal studio communications. Though he thought he was still the franchise's future, he had been quietly ejected. Even worse, the incident happened at a time when he was most vulnerable, alone on the scene and cut off from his support system. Later, industry insiders acknowledged that this strategy wasn't a coincidence. They waited till he was isolated, one remarked bluntly. They wanted no opposition. With terrifying efficiency, Brosnan, who had stuck with the Bond franchise even when it was on the verge of demise in the 1990s, was cast aside. The executive in question has never been identified publicly, but industry insiders are aware of his identity. At the time, he was a rising star at the studio who viewed Brosnan as a barrier rather than an icon or collaborator. He thought Brosnan was too Bond, too elderly, and too costly. His polished image had turned into his curse as well as his signature. The studios were at a loss for what else to cast him in. His asking price fell from $12 million per picture to barely $3 million once he was fired. 12 people of his staff had to be let go. Ongoing projects come to an end. Within a span of 3 days, Pierce Brosnan transformed from one of Hollywood's most bankable celebrities to a guy frantically trying to reinvent himself. It had a huge emotional impact, as friends would later recount. Brosnan entered a silent, depressive phase. Even when their mother passed away, his children had hardly witnessed Dad cry. One close friend of his for many years recalled, he was just crushed. After giving Bond all, he was just erased. It went beyond simply losing a part. It was about losing his identity, years of hard work, and a legacy he was still building. Perhaps the creative choice was less painful than the cold way the guy himself had executed it, not merely fired, but wiped it from the face of the earth. Brosnan appeared to endure the majority of his pain in silence when the Casino Royale trailer was released, observing without commenting or raising any queries. Those close to Brosnan said they could tell how hurt he was, despite the fact that he himself didn't say anything about it. He had fought for the job twice, once in the 1980s when NBC prohibited him from working with Remington Steele, and again after losing Cassandra Harris, the lady who had landed him the role. When it was all over in 1994, he had not only won, but he had also kept a promise he had made to his wife. This made it even more difficult to accept the treachery. He had not just been swapped out. The very system he had fought to preserve had stabbed him severely in the back. Although Brosnan has refrained from publicly naming the CEO throughout the years, it is clear that he disapproves of him. In interviews, he has discussed it and described the incident as completely surprising, cruel, and extremely disrespectful. Since then, Brosnan has essentially revived his career as a ghostwriter, a matador, and the lead in Black Adam as Dr. Fate. However, that scar still exists. This was not personal, in contrast to other discarded complaints, friends who have assumed roles, sons lost to addiction, or co-stars with inflated egos. It was a systematic issue. An independent corporate choice. And the betrayal was like a stab to the heart for a man who cherishes fidelity. Brosnan never makes a comeback to Bondland. No promotional efforts or cameos, even as a member of the gathering. Press and fan requests for any sort of appearance have been courteously turned down. The wound must be deep. For Pierce, even though the executive remains anonymous in public, he is the one who put a stop to a period of time that was devoid of dignity, grace, and eye contact. Brosnan's lengthy, agonizing career is haunted by that choice. But the silence that followed was far more painful. The producers made a single call. No news releases honoring his name, no thanking montage, no commemoration. Hollywood just went on. This was deafening for a man who had practically put his life in danger while pulling off his own exploits, such as the hair-raising bungee jump in GoldenEye. Please remember to like the video, subscribe for additional behind-the-scenes insights, and leave a comment if you were as moved by this tale as we were. Which performer most surprised you? Don't leave just yet, too. To learn more about Hollywood's secret tales, click on the next video that appears on your screen.